There's so much conversation and dialogue in the marketplace right now on this concept of private exclusives and a private exclusive listing network. And I don't want to get into criticism or opinion or criticizing those with opinions on the topic. All I want to do with the purpose of this video is, as quickly as possible, explain why we're using a private listing network, how specifically I'm explaining it to not just real estate agents, but actually buyers and sellers that we're currently working with as recently as last night, right, which was May 20th, on an appointment, on a listing appointment with fellow Dwell agent downtown Mike Brown. Although Michael Brown, we were not downtown or in any type of environment that represented Cosmopolitan. We were in, alternatively, spectacular rural Bucks County, Pennsylvania. And I explained, what I want to do is share exactly how I explained what our plans were with a private exclusive and three-phase marketing approach to this particular seller and why it gets the results that it does. So without further ado, so first of all, like understanding the problems. The problem right now, and again, this is exactly how I explained it to the seller as we were sitting in their living room. The problem right now is we have a complicated market, right? Pricing is not easy. Pricing's hard. And in addition to pricing being hard unto its own, like understanding the components that we're working in today's environment, lower number of sales, lower number of inventory, which means less competition, and a varying supply-demand balance that gets impacted by things that are completely out of control, like interest rates, for example, and fluctuations in inventory. And so because of that, pricing is not necessarily an easy thing to do. And in addition, we have tons of other influence into people's living rooms and homes that in some cases are grossly inaccurate. And so as I went through this explanation of explaining that when we go through a three-phased approach and starting with a private exclusive, it allows us to take time to research and gauge what kind of reaction and consult with the brokerage community to gain the most insight into how well we may be able to be received before actually going live. And I explained that to him. The question came up literally last night: do you ever increase prices after going through that private exclusive network? And so I said, funny you should ask. And I explained a scenario that happened earlier this year, and I want to walk you through that same scenario to show you exactly what our steps were prior to launching live. And then once we actually went into that private exclusive time frame before actually launching live and getting the result that we did. And so I'll start with, first of all, just kind of understanding what is involved in the private exclusive process. First of all, we start with a three-phase approach, and I'm not going to share Robert's video. You can go to our website and find that yourself. But what I do want to share is understanding like the problem behind it, which I explained. Pricing is hard, and explaining exactly what we're doing through this process. So in that private exclusive phase, we're able to test, in some cases, aspirational pricing. We're able to harness the power of being in a true pre-marketing process, which can elevate interest and anticipation before we go live. We can learn very valuable engagement insights from what we receive by way of feedback during that process. And finally, we're able to protect our clients. We're able to protect and control the experience and the process. We're able to control things like days on markets, and ultimately, what we're seeing in terms of feedback from the market before actually going live, and then making decisions that are ultimately going to affect that. So the next step is I want to share this particular listing that I had mentioned, which was, and this is it here, it was in southern New Jersey. It's a home that I sold to these particular clients about 10 years ago. So I had not been in the home, since that time, but certainly, obviously maintain communication. And the call came in to me sometime early in the year, whereby they had the interest in making a move and moving into a bigger home. They had the home in mind, and we had a conversation about what it would look like, some of the options in terms of being able to sell before they could buy. Long story short, we had a limited window if they didn't want to lose that home to get pricing right and maximize the best financial outcome of this home before making that move. And so when we look here, when I mentioned like, you look at things like the information that's available online, and Zillow effectively is like, it's an abomination of just bad, inaccurate information. And here we can see as we look at the early stages, prior to list date, when we went live at the end of February, right, immediately prior, the Zillow's estimate was ticking along in the mid $490,000 range, 495. All of a sudden we go live and then boom, it jumps to our list price, which was 540. And we can actually see this in a table view as well. As we go back historically, we can see it was, leading up 494, 495, all of a sudden, boom, it increases immediately upon list date. And so the reality is that impacts the market, and it creates a challenge. So the next phase of my job at that point is to then go ahead and say, okay, we've got this information. The owner, the sellers had that number in mind. They were able to obviously see it. So I do my own what we call comparative market analysis of the property, which is obviously an important step in the process, where I am then going to compare this home to the most recent comparable sales in the immediate market, and looking at things like obviously location, proximity to our subject. I'm looking at things like square footage count, bedrooms, bathrooms, etc. What's really cool about this feature is I can then go in and compare like which had the nicer kitchens, and really zone in to see what was relevant, what was going to be most relevant in our comparison search. The challenge was, if you can see, most of these sales that had occurred were last year. They were in October, last July. This one was November, another July, another September. There was only one active listing. This actually since sold, and there was one under contract. So there weren't a lot of really great relevant comps that were as recent as we were talking about, which these were conversations that were taking place in mid-February. So I had to make some adjustments based on time. Enter a three-phase marketing approach. I started with our buyer demand tool, which we can see here, where I can actually test what kind of response we're getting based upon where we position the house at the time that we enter market. And I can see what agents and colleagues in the communication, now this is dated a little because this is from when we went live in February, but I can see what agents that are working in the community are currently working with active clients that this home would certainly fit the demand of. And we can see exactly what kind of response we would get at different markets. At that point, my job is to then have conversations with those agents in the marketplace, get that kind of valuable feedback without learning blindly what kind of response we're going to get, which can save, again, we had no time. There was a house that this client wanted, they didn't want to lose it, and any prolonged period of time on the market would have caused them to lose the home that they wanted to get. So we had to be very accurate in terms of pricing. Net bottom line, we went live at the end of February. We started off, my gut feeling was in that early private exclusive phase, probably somewhere between 525 and 535. After having some conversations and seeing what kind of feedback we were going to get, we ended up going live at 540. We ended up having multiple offers within about 30 hours, and we sold it. We chose a buyer that was willing to pay the full asking price and settle in an extraordinary period of time, and that was invaluable to the experience. Right? As we went through the process, I'll share with you, like, had we gone in, and how I would describe is like a little more blindly, when you look at the other comps that were on the market at the time, we didn't have time to spare. Many of these, right, like here's the one that was on the market, I think 75 days in the same development as the subject, went through a price reduction. They started off at 538, they dropped to 514. They ended up selling for more than their most recent asking price, but the cost was 75 days in the process. We didn't have 75 days. And that's what's important about this experience. So we were able to use Private Exclusive to gain really valuable insight in terms of what was happening in the marketplace, What we weren't doing was to use it to exclude exposure. We were using it to gain greater exposure and greater insight so that once we hit it and went live, we were at the right price at the right time. We already had, right, we took advantage of the benefits that pre-marketing does, which is gains more excitement and creates, fast energy and fast anticipation, ultimately netting multiple offers within the first 30 hours. That was the goal. And, and it worked, and it works beautifully. And it saves, and again, saves countless days on market, the possibility of price reductions. Just to get back into that, looking at the three-phase approach, what we're finding in terms of results as we walk through this, and I'll share a link to where this page is, but net bottom line, we're finding that we're selling homes to, on average, 2.9% higher closing price. We're seeing homes sell for 20% faster, and we're seeing a 30% less likely to see a price reduction. That's impactful, and that's wildly valuable. As it applies to this particular case, again, right? This price reduction, had we gone through that approach in this scenario, we would not have been able to secure the home that they wanted. And that was the bottom line, right? That was the goal, was securing the home and not losing, and that was the net result we received. I hope this is helpful in terms of approach and understanding the why. The why is definitely not to exclude exposure or create any kind of entry pass or gateway to the listings that would exclude buyers in any way at all. In fact, our goal is to enhance and expand on the eyes and the buyer pool that we're able to get in front of, and expand the brokerage community relationships that we have. We have way more conversations now with people that are in the community. We're able to search and use reverse prospecting tools to see the active agents that are working with buyers in the community right now, to just gain better insight and to create, net bottom line is to create better experiences, protect really important insights for our clients, and to just gain, better overall outcomes for the clients that we represent. I hope this is helpful. If you have any questions at all about the process or what it means, or how to perhaps start off in that process, don't hesitate to reach out and drop a DM. And if you want any insight into what kind of responses this is really getting real time, in addition to these averages, like any other examples that I've recently shared, just drop a message and I'll be happy to share those with you. Hope this was helpful, and I hope that this is meaningful in understanding this far greater and broad conversation that's taking place in this and every other marketplace across the country right now around private exclusives. Have an amazing afternoon, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Take care.